Alright, so welcome to Friday's Java class. More time giving you a chance to work on your code and help with your homework, which is corrected with the date. So underneath activities there, I go to homework chapter 11. We did the fix this code on Wednesday. So you need to turn in that fix this code part. Remember what we did? I basically walked you through the fixing this code. Turn that in. And I'll just verify that's like a participation. And in the chapter 11, let's see what they want us to do. Oh, I have to turn this editing off or I get half my screen displayed. And I can't turn editing off. It's way back at the main course here. So where's my turn editing off button? There. Now I can get my screen back. And now let's go down to that chapter 11 exercise. What they're asking us to do in chapter 11 exercise is to write some classes. We're going to write some classes. We're going to write a class named time class, and we're going to have some prompts for a time, and we're going to handle exceptions. And we're going to throw and catch exceptions. And then I have a couple just little practice array exercises. I'm going to go mainly over this. But let's first look at an example of living my life. I'm going to start from scratch here with a new class. I'm going to call this class My Life. We have a life class called My Life. Okay, and in My Life, I have a constructor, public, My Life, and let's say my life, I get my name, so string name. Alright, so there's my life. I'm instantiated, my little class has a life, and maybe we'll, what should we do? We'll have a member, private member string, private string name. And I'll give myself a name. That's a dangerous variable to actually have because name is such a common word. Often it's a keyword. I better call it my name. My name equals name. Occasionally, you accidentally name a variable something so generic that it gives you a compile error. So be careful, like a variable called data. Often, some programming languages say, no, wait a minute, that's a reserved word. Okay, and in my life, I live my life. And during my life, what do? I public string I public string returns a string. How about I work? In my life class, I work. And I'll return a string working. There's my life. What an exciting life. Let's make our life a little bit more exciting. Public string play. And I'll return the string playing. Alright, so that's all good. I can do two things in my life, work and play. Pretty stable life. But now, in my life, time and chance happens to us all. So we have public string chance. Something happens in our life. And this is where we might have exceptions occur. Oh, I better spell it right. So to determine what happens in my chance event in my life, let's determine by having a variable, an integer variable. Let's call it, what should I call it? Event. And we'll set it to be equal to a random number between 0 and 3. Oh, let's make it a dice. Let's make it between 0 and 6. How do I make a random number between 0 and 6? Let's make it 1 to 6. How do I make a random number that goes from 1 to 6? I'll give you a hint. It starts with math.random. It sounds pretty good. You'd have to, at this point, you'd want to look, actually, if you look at random, look at that. It gives you the help right there. It returns a double value, so it takes no parameters. So you can't put anything within the parentheses. It returns a double value with a positive sign greater than or equal to 0 and less than 1. So it might be equal to 0, but it's going to be less than 1. No, we're going to leave it. We want an event to stay an integer, so we're going to do something to fix that problem. Now let's see. One of the first things I will do when I go to these help pages is I'll skim right to the bottom and say, don't tell me how it works. Just show me an example. Okay? And so I'll often, oh, look that he does actually have an example here. Let's see, because I want a random number between 0 or between 1 and 6. Well, it doesn't give me exactly that example, but at least I know it returns a number between 0 and 1. Okay, so I don't have great examples. At this point, I could go to the internet and say random Java random number range or 1 to 6. Or, with a little practice, if I know this returns 0 to 1, I can multiply it by, what should I multiply it by? If I multiply it by 6, I'll get a random number, a double between 0 and almost 6. It will never be equal quite to 6. So if I add 1 to it, it'll be a random number from 1 to 6.9999. So this will give me a double random number from 1 all the way up to 5.9999, because it will never quite equal 6. Because remember, it's never quite equal to 1, so when I multiply it by 6, it'll never be quite equal to 6. It'll be really, really close. But like you saw, Brandon, it doesn't like this. It says, wait a minute, this returns a double. I have a type mismatch. And what do you do when you see a type mismatch? If you know I do want an integer, there's multiple things. I could do a round it to an integer, or I could do the lazy way, or I'll call it the more efficient way. I just cast it to an integer, which means throw away the decimal part and give me the integer part. That's what typecasting does. That's the first thing I'll try if I know, hey, I don't care that it's a double. I want the integer part. Don't worry about rounding it. Just throw away the decimal part. That's what typecasting does. That just says, throw away the decimal part, give me the integer. So whenever you see a type mismatch error, remember, first think about, do I just want to do a typecast? Some languages like Visual Basic do this for you. I think JavaScript also does this for you. It just says, okay, I'll throw away that part without you having to do the typecast. With Java, you have to tell it, okay, it is an integer over there. Yes, turn it into an integer. Typecast it. Okay, now, for this chance event here, we got to get into the events part. Now we're going to do a switch. And how does switch work? Switch the number. This will let me do, instead of having if event equals 0, if event equals 1, I can just say case 1, and we'll have an event happen if that random number is a 1. And let's just have, for case 1, we'll get into this now, will cause an exception to happen. And just to get rid of this little squiggly, let's just say, let's just return. If we ever get to the bottom, we'll return chance. Okay, so now that's not complaining up there. But if I have an event, a random number of 1 occurring in my life, I want to have an exception occur. So here's how we cause exceptions. We throw them. I can throw, and let's call it spilled my milk exception. And I'm going to send it a string arg. Now Java does, or Eclipse does a wonderful thing for us. In order for us to be able to throw a spilled my milk exception, I have to declare a function that throws this exception. Watch how easy Eclipse makes this for me. I can hover over this, and it says, oh, all right, create the method spilled my milk exception. And look what it does for us. It helps me learn how to declare functions that throw exceptions. I declare a function that returns an exception, and it takes a string. Look how wonderful Java does that for me. This is how we can declare our own exception method. So, and the book shows us that we can not only write exception methods, I can actually write classes that have exceptions in them. And that's what we're going to do for the homework. So here is a method to throw an exception, and in here I can do a stack trace or whatever. All I have is a string, and the default is to return no. I can do other things in there, but there is a way to handle an exception. Now we've still got a problem. Because now I'm throwing an exception, I need to add a throws declaration somewhere. Because my class, remember my class is MyLife? Because MyLife now has a throw in it, I have an error in compiling until I tell Java and the compiler, by the way, MyLife throws an exception. So now I let Eclipse do this, add the throws declaration, and let's see where that goes. I see the chance now, the chance method, because I have a throw inside of it, I have to put throws exception. I have to add that to the definition of my function. And again, Java or Eclipse is doing all this for me, helping me see if I have a throws inside my method, I need to have the throws exception in there. All right, so now let's see the use of this back in my main. So I have no errors in mylife.java. I am throwing a spilled my milk exception, and let's do something in here. Let's just at least send something to the output system. Out.println. Don't cry. So the exception got thrown. This will just come out to the console. But so far, now it's all happy and working. Remember, because I'm throwing an exception, that had to be added, the throws exception. Now let's go back to my main and try to use this class called MyLife. So I'll go back to my main, and from the very beginning here, I'll just put in MyLife. I'll call it life equals new MyLife. And it takes a parameter, and I'll put in my name, Arthur. And now let's live. Life dot live. Wait, it's work. Work. Okay, that's all good. Life dot play. All good. Let's try life dot chance. Oh, wait a minute. I can work and play, but what's wrong with chance? Well, let's hover over it and see. Oh, it throws an exception. Because it throws an exception, I have to surround it in a try-catch. Because I've told the compiler chance may throw an exception, I now surround that with a try-catch. And because it throws an exception, it's in a try-catch, I can handle the exception. I could put, continue, nothing happened, I'm all happy. Here, I had an exception, such as I spilled my milk, but I'm not crying. And I can continue on with my life. Now I could put this in an endless loop, live forever, and occasionally have an exception. And the exception, because I'm not doing anything but doing a stack trace, my program's not going to quit. If I actually had an exception that caused me to want to quit the program, I could put, is it exit? Or it's system.exit. I don't remember. I forgot the method to actually end my program. We won't worry about that for now, because we want to get to the homework part. So see how we did that with just a little example of life. Now, back to the homework. In the homework, we need to create a class called time class. And let's just worry about the basics, and then we will create exception. We're actually going to create additional exception classes. We're going to go beyond just creating a method that is an exception. So let's get that time class going. And I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call mine time class 2. Go ahead and call yours time class. Since I worked through this, I'm going to call mine time class 2. And you can actually, I haven't obsessed about this enough. Make sure, absolutely sure, you put comments in your code with your name at the top and your kind of like MLA format at the top. Your name, this class. You will get points docked if you do not have your name in there, declaring this is your work. Okay, so in here we want to declare the method time prompt. Of course, we need some method constructor here. So public time class 2, and they've told us in this program, let's see, we're going to prompt for the hour, minute, second. We're going to be validating it. So we'll create a class that takes no parameters and maybe assigns default values to the hour, minute, and second. So our time class has I guess they're integers, int hour, int minute, int second. And without a constructor, we'll make hour equals 0. No, let's make the hour by default be 12 o'clock noon. So make hour be 12, minute be 0. So 12 o'clock noon will be the default. Second equals 0. So there is our declaration of our class. No exceptions yet. We want to go back to the requirements here. We want to prompt the user for an hour, minute, and second. Now we can put that, let's make this method called time prompt that will do the prompting now. So we have the default constructor, but we want to then actually call the time prompt that asks for hour, minute, second. All right, so let's go back to now create the method time prompt. And it's going to just set the hour, minute, second after asking. So let's do void time. It's public void, right? Time prompt. No parameters because it's going to ask for hour, minute, second. So prompt for hour, minute, and second. So do you remember now how to prompt the user for input? Something to do with a scanner, right? Scanner in equals new scanner system.in. And this says, oh, you better do that import of scanner. Let's go ahead and do the import. And now I'm ready to scan for input. We better prompt for the input first. So let's do a system.out.print hour, question mark, and now scan for the hour. So we'll do hour equals, well, let's see, yeah, we'll do that. We'll say hour equals in dot next int. So we're expecting them to give us an integer. Now it doesn't throw any exceptions. It doesn't force me to surround this in a try-catch. But we do find that back in our requirements, they want us to define 3 exception classes. InvalidHRException, InvalidMinuteException. Let's not worry about the other 2. Let's get the hour working. And we'll leave it to you to do the minute and seconds. So here we go. InvalidHRException. That's what we want to do. Now, rather than what I did in the life is having a method, it's asking us to create a class called InvalidHRException. So you know how to create classes. New class, file new class, and InvalidHRException. Make sure I spelled exactly right. Oh, it doesn't have the TION. InvalidHRExcept. We'll go with what they've requested, even though I'd rather have it filled out. They've asked us to name it that. Sometimes you have to follow the specs, even though it may not be your exact spelling. So there's where I'm creating the class. And, oh, it's not letting me do that because I've already created one. I have to call mine 2. So don't put the 2 there for yours. So there's my InvalidHRExcept. To make it an exception class, I say to it, extends exception. Because this is going to be my exception class. It's just like a regular class at the start until I tell it this. Now it becomes an exception that can be thrown. So it's a special kind of class that can be thrown. And now inside of here, what are we going to do? If they give me an invalid value for hours, then I'm going to throw and catch the InvalidHRException. What in the world do they mean by that? Watch this. In this constructor, the typical exception constructor, InvalidHRExcept. So I have to put 2 there for mine. This is my second version of it. Without any parameters. Oh, sorry, it does take a parameter. Sorry, it does take a parameter. String. I'll call it string message. Let's just do system.out.println InvalidHRException. And we'll concatenate on the message. This is all I'm putting in my exception handler, or my exception class. So I've defined my exception class. I've defined one simple constructor that simply prints out a message. Now, here's how we use it. Back to my time class. Here's where I check whether the hour is valid. Here's the simple way to check. If hour is less than 1 or 12 is less than hour, what am I going to do? I'm going to throw InvalidHRExcept. And I made it 2 because for my second version. And it takes a parameter, and I'm going to put in the message bad hour given. Now Eclipse is giving me a reminder, wait a minute, there's something missing. Let's find out what's missing. Hover over this, I see, oh, I need to put the new keyword in there. That's one thing that's missing. I have to say it's a new exception because it's an exception class. Now I have to add the throws declaration to my time prompt because it may cause that exception because it has the throw in there. So here's a couple things that are new for us here. Because it's a class, not a method, I have to do the throw new InvalidHRException. And they show that in the book as well. When I have my own class, that's the exception class, I have to create the exception when I throw it. So that's why I'm putting the new in there. So I'll put a little comment here. What's happening there is I'm create and throw the exception. Because it's an exception class, in order to be able to be thrown, I have to have the new there. Yeah. Yep. The actual invalid, the class. So in the class, all I'm doing is a system out of the message that was used when I instantiated or created the exception. So I'm doing the check. I would more likely have a validate hour method. Yeah. Oh, you're right. Let's see. Let's check it. Let's see. In 12-hour notation. That's right. So we might have to, how are we going to know? Then returns the time string in 24-hour notation. That's right. Time in 12-hour. No, I guess we're going to have to look for the PM. Enter time in 12-hour notation. Yeah. So we have to change the prompt. So the hour has to be between 1 and 12. We also have to check for the AM and PM. So let's go back to our checking. So I have to add another prompt to that. All right, thanks for catching that. So back here, since it did say in the specs it has to be in 12-hour notation, although the easy answer would be, oh, let's just make it military time. They did say they're entering in 12-hour notation. And our customer is very fussy. They want us to do this, follow the specs. So I not only have to ask for the hour, let's just go system.out.print AM/PM. I'll say something like, please enter AM or PM. Oh, forgot the entering code. Okay, so we'll prompt with that, and now we'll do string AM PM equals in.next. Next. In.next just gives me what they type. Now, what do we do here? Let's see. Yeah, let's just convert it. Yeah, I think we get a string and we can do to lower. Then we don't have to worry about handling upper or lowercase. Now we basically check if AM PM is equal to PM, what do we do? What do we do to hour if they give us PM? And I'm going to save it in military time. Yeah, so I just add 12. So if they told me PM, I'll just say hour plus equals 12. Now I check to see whether they've given me a valid hour. So if they give me 13 and they say PM, I'll add 12 to it and get 25, and then I know they've given me an invalid hour. And if they give me anything other than PM, I just ignore it. So I'm not checking if they've told me AM. I could just say, is it PM question mark, if they give me yes or no. But I'll ask them to type in AM or PM. So the prompting and how you prompt, you can decide. You can just say, is it PM, and ask them for a yes or no. And then your test would be, if they answered yes, add 12. Now, our checking, I had to modify this. Now I have now at this point convert to military time, right? Now for the minutes and seconds, it's a lot easier because there's no AM or PM. I'm just asking, and I'm checking, is it within a range of 1 to 60? So at this point, you should be able to do the handles minute and second. So we also now need to prompt for minute and second. And since we have a little extra time, I can get you started on that. Then I thought I would, well, I guess we can work on that. There's another activity I'm going to have. Maybe we'll do that on Monday. A little code practice for waking you up on Monday. Now, do you know what to do for the minute now? Let's make sure. Let's check my specs here. Make sure I'm following it. Let's see. The time prompt asks for it. Unless you want me to, would you like me to help you get started on these other two? Where you're being asked to, basically, I threw in some array problems to give you a little practice with arrays. Find the index of the first occurrence of the smallest element in the array. Do you want any help with that, or do you think you're good? Anyone? What do you think? Are you good on the exceptions one? You basically are doing the similar thing with minute and second. Making a class, making these exact classes where you've seen how I made the InvalidHRException. We'll go to this one just to get you started on this little array problem. And since I'm in the project right now, it's not asking me to create any classes. It's just asking me to create a method. So I can create that right inside my main. First smallest index. And it takes an integer array as a parameter. So I'm going to go back to my main and just throw it in here at the bottom of my main. And here's a good thing to go all the way to the bottom. We know that this is end of main class. And so this is my previous method. End of, that was a cat method. Remember, don't accidentally start methods right in the middle of another method, or you get all sorts of crazy errors. So here's where I can put another method. And it's going to return, according to the specs, it's going to return the index. So that means that's going to be an integer. So it's going to be a public int, first smallest index, that takes an integer array as a parameter. So it'll look like this. Public int first smallest index. Yep, and then the type would be int, 2 empty square brackets, and give your array whatever name you want to call it. I'm going to call it A. And now I can come back to my specs and return the index of the first occurrence of the smallest element. And since I have the description right there, I can copy, come over to here, make a comment, and paste. And because that gets rather large, I'll put it on 2 lines. Returns the index of the first occurrence of the smallest element. Now break that into pieces. Let's put a little pseudocode and then we'll write the code. Don't worry about the squigglies here. Since it's returning an integer, I have to remember there needs to be return. And before I forget, I'm going to put end of first smallest index.
Returning the smallest index, right?
Yeah, returns the index of the first occurrence of the smallest element. So, what we first need to do is find the smallest element by just looping through all the elements in my array and keep track of location of smallest element.
Why not find a.length, which is named to a variable, dot length equal 0, which is the smallest element?
Well, we're looking for the smallest element. That means the minimum, the smallest value. So yeah, so smallest of the smallest element, that means the smallest value in the array, not just the index. So we know index 0 is always going to be the first thing in the array. It's not the smallest index, it's the smallest or the minimum. It's probably a min is probably the best thing to do. So we could do this in a loop, but this might be useful well, I guess we'll do the loop because that's most efficient. So we have to keep track of two things. We'll call this the min, and we'll call this the min index. So let's declare those two variables. Int min. Now we don't know what the min is yet, so let's make it a bracket 0. No error checking yet. How about we, in case it is, let's just start doing a little error checking just for starting to practice. If a dot length, if 0 is equal to a dot length, return 0. Just a little minor error checking. If they give us an empty array, now we'll assume it's not an empty array. Min is equal to a dot 0, and int min index is equal to 0, the first element of my array. Now I'm going to write a loop that will loop through each element in the array. What would that loop look like? Yeah, it's going to be a for loop. For int, and it can be what you want to use for a name. I'll let you choose. ARR. We could, since we've already seen one, but we don't know if we're at the end of the array yet. It could be just an array with one thing in it. I think I would go 0, even though I've already decided 0. Just to be safe, 0 may be the only thing in it. I'll go 0 ARR is less than a dot length. And then, very good. And I don't know why that semicolon always appears. Leaves me hanging. ARR plus plus. The standard way of going through an array, you don't always have to use the variable I. You can give whatever variable. And now, because I'm going to be, all I'm doing is checking to see whether if min, or if the new A's, the position I'm at, is less than min. So I'll have a check if, let's see, is the one I'm checking a bracket ARR. Remember, the ARR is taking the index. If that's less than what I currently have as the min, then I know I found a new minimum. And I'm going to do two things. I'm going to set a new minimum value and keep track of where that was. Yeah, the min index. So I'm going to set min to be at the value where I am, new min, and index. So min now is equal to A of wherever I'm at, ARR. And the new index is what? Where am I in the array? Here's what's in there. Here's the value of what's there. What's my index of where it is? ARR. Because that's going through the array. And now that I've found it, what do I return? Yeah. Min index. Done. And don't forget the semicolon. All right, we'll stop there because Mrs. Nixon is anxious to get her class going here. Now you get to do the other version. It's very similar. Put comments in along the way of what you're doing. That's all just comments. Here's where I'm declaring the value ARR. All right, let's check.